There is a lot to take in, Matt. We haven't heard from the president via his Twitter video feed today, but what he has done is held a 2-hour, what he calls a virtual radio rally on a right-wing talk show. But what, of course, we're all waiting to see is a negative test result coming from the president, because that's what he'll need if he plans to head off down to Florida tomorrow night to host that rally. His doctor yesterday did indicate that the president would be ready to do that, to get that clearance later today. But remember, this is the same doctor who just a few days ago said the president would have to wait until Monday until he's given any green light. But so desperate is Donald Trump to get going that he is planning to give a live in-person interview on Fox tonight, where he will be examined in real time by a doctor to millions, in front of millions of people. What could possibly go wrong? If there's one thing we know about Donald Trump, it's that he lives for his rallies. Thousands of adoring supporters chanting 4 more years is the medicine he craves the most. And with an election just 25 days away, he's desperate to get back on the stage. But there's a problem.
I will say this, absentee is okay, because absentee ballots, excuse me.
The president is still recovering from COVID-19 and is yet to test negative for the deadly disease.
Have you had a test since your diagnosis a week ago?
Well, what we're doing is probably the test will be tomorrow, the actual test, because there's no reason to test all the time. But
he didn't seem to want to answer that, but was keen to stress one thing.
I think I'm going to try doing a rally on Saturday night, if we have enough time to put it together. But we want to do a rally in Florida, probably in Florida on Saturday night.
So keen that he seemingly forgot to mention the unveiling by the FBI of a right-wing plot to kidnap Michigan's Democratic governor, Gretchen Whitmer.
13 members of 2 militia groups who were preparing to kidnap and possibly kill me.
The men had allegedly planned a violent overthrow of the state's government, an apparent response to the restrictions she imposed to combat the virus earlier this year. At the time, the shutdowns led to armed protests, even inside the state's Capitol building.
You policemen are all cowards!
But rather than condemn the violence, Donald Trump at the time instead tweeted, "Liberate Michigan," as he urged her to open back up, despite rising infections. Having called for liberation, is it any wonder that 2 separate groups are accused of plotting to do exactly that?
When our leaders meet with, encourage, or fraternize with domestic terrorists, they legitimize their actions, and they are complicit.
President Trump didn't like that, tweeting later, "Governor Whitmer of Michigan has done a terrible job." He went on to note the FBI had foiled the plot against her, but rather than say thank you, she calls me a white supremacist. And instead of condemning the 2 militia groups that planned to kidnap and kill her, he points out that his rival, Joe Biden, refuses to condemn Antifa, anarchists, looters and mobs. On the campaign trail in Arizona yesterday, Joe Biden, who has condemned mob violence, urged the president to act.
The president has to realize the words he utters matter. And you saw what the head of the FBI said a couple days ago. He said the greatest terrorist threat in America is from white supremacists. Why can't the president just say, stop, 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 stop?
The reality is, though, many of the white supremacist groups support Donald Trump, and behind in the polls, he won't want to alienate any voters so close to the election.
Siobhan Kennedy. And just before we came on air, I spoke to Evan McMullen, a former CIA operations officer who ran as an independent for president in 2016. He now runs Stand Up Republic, an anti-Trump conservative campaign group focused on defending democracy. I began by asking him whether or not he thinks that President Trump is acting in a responsible way at the moment.
He seems to be acting in an erratic way, but I have to say that that's not anything especially new with him. I think the American people have come to expect him to change his views overnight or from minute to minute, statement to statement. But it's true that he does appear to be acting more erratic. There are concerns about whether some of the treatment he's receiving for his coronavirus infection are perhaps changing his or impacting his decision-making ability.
You sound a lot more cautious than some of his critics. So I wonder if you agree with Nancy Pelosi's plan today to push forward with a commission to look into whether he's actually fit to hold office just 3 weeks before the election, whether he should be removed under your 25th Amendment.
You know, I think there does need to be more evaluation of President Trump's mental health. And I am not a doctor, and so I'm not in a position to do that. I think all American voters have to make a judgment about that. That's our responsibility. But I do think there needs to be a closer look at his fitness to serve in the position that he does.
I mean, I have to say, looking at your country from this side of the Atlantic, it seems a bit strange that you have an election essentially between a 74-year-old man who is accused of going mad by his opponents and a 77-year-old man who's accused of being too decrepit and too old, barely functioning by his opponents. What a choice.
Yes, that's true. I mean, look, it would be, I suppose, nice to have younger, vibrant nominees from both parties in a way. But look, Joe Biden's experience, he has 50 years of public service. I'm a Republican. He's a Democrat. You know, I would love to see a principled Republican running this year. That's not happening. But I do believe that Joe Biden is certainly capable of being an excellent president. That doesn't mean I and others like me will agree with everything he does. It doesn't mean we won't oppose different decisions that he makes. But I do believe there's plenty of common ground, especially around protecting our democracy. And that's what this election is about.
And yet, despite everything you say, President Trump still has 42% support in the national opinion polls. And that's quite a chunk, isn't it? He could still win this election.
It is still possible that he could win, although Biden's lead in the polls across the country nationally and also in the competitive states, which will ultimately, of course, decide the election, Biden's lead is expanding right now. So it's not looking good for President Trump. But as you point out, in our system, you can lose the popular vote and still win the race, win the presidency.
Evan McMullen, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.